Este episódio foi produzido em inglês. Você pode assistir a entrevista pelo YouTube, com legendas em português.
Este episodio fue producido en inglés. Puede ver la entrevista en YouTube con subtítulos en español.
All right, everyone. So for this podcast, we have a very special guest. It's Erika Voogd. Actually, this podcast is the third of a series that we have been doing with, let's say, specialists on some fields. We did the last two episodes were about laying hens, about dairy cows, and today we're going to talk about meat industry. So that's why we invited one of the most renowned specialists in the world, Erika Voogd. She has a very long curriculum, and I'm not going to read it to you, but I mean, she's been performing lots of consulting jobs to companies all around the globe, from Europe to the USA to Asia, Latin America. And she also worked closely with Temple Grandin and with McDonald's, with a long list of companies. And for this chat, I have invited Rosangela Poletto, who is member of our scientific committee and is part of Certified Humane organization since 2005. So she can talk more comfortably about the meat industry more than myself. So I have invited her to have this chat with you, Erika. So first of all, thank you for accepting the invitation. And I pass the word to you, Rosangela, to talk to Erika.
Thank you, Luis.
Hi, great.
Pleasure.
Yes, thank you, Luis, for the introduction. Hi, Erika. I have to say that it's a great pleasure to have you here with us today. And we thank you very much for your time. I know that right now you are on a road trip, working. So you're taking this time for us. So we appreciate. We should be talking today about such a relevant topic, which is humane slaughter of live cattle. Okay, and I know you have been a big partner of Certified Humane for quite a while. But before we move on, I'd like just to recall that I've known you for quite some time now, for over a decade, and we first met over a Certified Humane training at slaughterhouses back in 2008. And so on that line, can you please tell us a bit of your story with Certified Humane? So when did you begin working with HFAC in US and Certified Humane in general? Can you just tell us a little bit about your role also with Certified Humane?
I would love to. I'm very proud to say that I started with Certified Humane back in 2004, when it was a tiny beginning. And I believe I might have been one of the very first slaughter auditors that they had. And at that time, Rosangela, we were working primarily with very small plants because we were just getting started with the program, and we did not have large producers in the program at that moment. So we were working with some very small plants, and then it quickly evolved to where we were working with larger plants and larger volumes of animals. So I continued to perform slaughter audits to benefit Certified Humane. And then, as you know, I believe it was in 2008 that you attended a training, one of the first trainings that I did, where I was training with the other auditors so that they would be prepared to expand the program, because by that time it was growing very large, including Canada and Brazil and other countries. So at that point, we needed to train people around the world, and that's where I became involved in training as well.
Very good. Yeah. It's a quite a nice story. The time goes by so fast, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and Erika, where has this role taken you? I mean, what have been the experiences? I mean, since then. I mean, since you became involved with training.
I have trained. I have audited for Certified Humane and trained for Certified Humane throughout the United States, and then as well in Canada, in Brazil, and then one of my very favorite trips was to Tasmania, Australia, which you cannot complain about at all. Okay, so it was absolutely lovely, and my most amazing memory there is that we were conducting the training on the ranch for the Greenham Company. Okay, we were conducting the training on their ranch. So we were all sitting in their offices. And as I'm teaching, I look out and I see their cattle romping across the lush green grass and romping back the other way. And I thought, wow, they're really happy. And then later, the next day, we went to a lunch, and the same thing. The cattle are romping across the grass and romping back. So they were probably the happiest cattle I've ever seen in my life in Tasmania.
That was nice. So which are the main species, Erika, that you've been having experiences, I mean, on these trainings and also in the field in general?
Primarily with livestock, which would include pigs and sheep and cattle, primarily, and then also young beef cattle, which in our country we call veal. Okay.
Well, very good. So, I mean, Certified Humane has, since its start, I mean, adopted the transport and the slaughter audit forms from written in the guidelines developed by Temple Grandin and also the North American Meat Institute, which we know now as NAMI, right? So, based on NAMI and your field experience, I mean, what criteria are important when evaluating the handling of livestock at slaughter? What would you consider critical?
Of course, the thing we stress the most at slaughter, you have to remember that the last moments of an animal's life can control the quality and the eating characteristics of the meat. So it's very important that we keep those animals calm and that we keep them in as low stress as possible during the transport and during the slaughter, so that we have a better eating experience and we make higher quality meat. So when we evaluate, primarily what our role as slaughter auditors is to evaluate the transport and the unload and make sure that they're unloaded quickly, that they're unloaded calmly. People aren't poking sticks into the truck or putting electrical prods into the truck to scare them, that they have a ramp that is not too sloped to where they can slip and fall. It's 20 degrees or less, and that it has traction. So usually it will have cleats on it to prevent them from slipping and falling, because we want to make sure that they have traction so that they don't slip and fall during the unload. And so we're looking to make sure that it's a timely unload, that it's a quiet unload, and that they're unloaded without any slips and falls. And then we want to place them in the pens for holding, make sure they have water, make sure they have ample room in the pens, that they're not overcrowded, that if it's a hot environment, that they have shade provided, and they have shelter. If it's a cold environment up in Canada, where it's extremely cold, most of the plants are indoor barns, just because it can be cold year round. It can be cold most of the year.
And again, which is different from Brazil, right? So we
exactly.
have the need. Yeah. So, and then that was a question that I had put in front. I mean, for you is, how do you consider shade, especially in countries like Brazil, tropical countries? And even though they are breeds that would accept heat well, would you still recommend, or would you still audit looking for a shade, considering the time that the animal stays at slaughterhouse waiting?
Most of the tropical countries that are doing a great job have implemented shade. Some even have covered barns, okay, because they just realize the importance. And you have to understand that if those animals overheat at the last minute, that changes the meat dramatically. All right, you use up the energy panting and breathing hard to try to cool itself, and you use up that energy and you change the whole quality of the meat. So it's a financial advantage to provide shade, all right, and comfort, as well as a welfare advantage. So yes, most of the tropical climates provide shade, and If you see open mouth breathing, if you see them open mouth breathing and panting, then they're overheating and shade needs to be provided. Okay.
Erika, let me just ask you, since you mentioned the ramp, the unloading ramp a little early. I know the NAMI requires that to be audited, just, slips and falls, right?
Yes.
But if you happen to be watching, observing, and unloading, and you don't see slips and falls as they are defined in the NAMI, but you see about 50% of the cattle skidding down, like they go down the ramp, but their feet kind of skid down. Yeah. How do you take that? I mean, how do you see that? Would that be something that you would be pointing out during your audit for improvement?
Absolutely. Okay, here's the thing. Slipping is not considered one of the core criteria. We didn't get to the core criteria yet. Slipping is not a core criteria. It's a secondary criteria. Falling is the core criteria. If you're seeing an animal fall, more than 1 out of 100 is considered a failure. But if you're seeing them skidding, there's a chance that they can be injured. They could pull a muscle. I live in a cold climate, Chicago, all right, and it gets icy in the winter, and I'm 63. If I'm not careful, I'm going to skid, okay, and I'm going to pull a muscle. So if you're seeing skidding, that's almost the precursor of what could become worse. It's telling you things could get worse. So it's best to figure out the problem. And it might be something as simple as getting a brush and some soap and scrubbing the ramp because it's slippery with biofilm. It could be something simple. Or you may need to install cleats, something that sticks up to protect their feet and keep their feet from skidding. I mean, it could be a very simple fix, but as a certified humane auditor, we would be commenting on that. And we will be saying, we expect some type of an action because we don't want this condition to be worse. If that makes sense?
Great. Yeah, of course. Yes,
all right.
It does. Definitely.
In discussing your other core criteria at the plants, all right, after they've been held in the pens and they have their water and they have their space and they have their shade and they're comfortable, then we're going to move them through the alleys, and usually we have what's called a crowd pen or a small staging area prior to sending them up to the stun box. And we want to make sure that we keep them flowing through these areas. All right. What happens with cattle is if they sit too long, they become comfortable and they don't want to go. And if you give them a chance to think about it, they're going to turn around and go back. So you want to keep them flowing through the areas. And then when they move into the stun box, you want to stun quickly, but you want to make sure the first shot is the best shot. And so we usually use what's called a captive bolt gun. Some of them are pneumatic and some of them, especially in my country, are operated with a firing charge. It's not a bullet, but it's a firing charge. And so we want to make sure that the first shot is the best shot, and the first shot causes insensibility. And so the animal is unconscious or insensible. All right. Along that route, we want to make sure they're not slipping and they're not falling again. And then after they're shot, we want to make sure that they're insensible before we raise them and conduct any bleeding exercises on them. So we want to make sure that they're insensible throughout that process. And again, one of the things that you see a lot in your country is head restraint. So in a lot of cases, they have a head restrainer, and this is considered a good practice because it helps to get the shot in the correct location on the forehead.
Right.
But cattle are different sizes, okay? So we want to make sure that any equipment that we have is adjustable, all right? We don't want to press a button and have it go the whole distance, no matter the size of the animal, all right? So we need it to be have partial strokes, so we can adjust it. For a big animal, we only need to move it a little bit. And for a little animal, we may need to move it more. And so we want to make sure the equipment is adjustable. And if we don't handle them correctly, if they have fear or they have pain, they're likely to vocalize. Cattle will not usually vocalize with a distress vocalization, woo, a moo, a loud moo. They will not usually vocalize if they're not in fear or pain. They may move with their look, towards their friends out in the yards, but they're not going to move during our active handling,
right,
if they're not having fear or pain. So
yeah,
it's really important that we measure vocalization, distress vocalization. That's one of our core criteria measures.
Right. I just want to make an observation that you're mentioning about the side pressure, but I also had seen, and I want to take the opportunity to ask you something else about the correct location for stunning, but also for the height of the head restrainer. Because if you are holding there a Nelore,
Yes,
which is a tall guy, which is a tall cattle, then the head holder, I mean, if it goes up like this, it goes at the maximum height, then the animal will be comfortable. Now, if you're talking about an European breed, Angus or some other, which is shorter cattle, then, and if you do all the extension, would you expect vocalization? Because I guess you would, right? I mean, the animal can stretch too much the neck, and then that may be painful too, right? You know what I'm saying?
That's why we talk about the mid-stroke positioning. Okay. So if we have a Nelore, we may raise it this much because, and if we have a beef animal, we may raise it a different amount. And I will give you an example. I was in a plant in Latin America, and they have what's called a rear pusher to push the animal up so that we can get them into the head holder. All right. And they were running typical size animals, and everything was fine. Everything was going along just fine. And then all of a sudden, they got a very big bull. It was a young bull, but he was very big. All right. And the operator is just doing his job and just going along because everybody's the same size. And all of a sudden comes a big one. And when the big animal came, it screamed. And afterwards, we tried to identify what happened, and you could see huge bruises on the rump of that animal because the operator had pushed too hard on the rear pusher, okay, and had adjusted the head differently. He had adjusted it for a small animal, not a large animal, okay? Well, the great part was that he was a very smart man, and we immediately showed him, look, this animal has bruises. We're losing money because you're over adjusting this large animal. And immediately he understood to make that adjustment and make it differently. All right. So it was an easy fix, but that's oftentimes the cause of the vocalization. And so we measure the vocalization. They can we say 5 out of 100 with a head restraint and 3 out of 100 without a head restraint in a stun box, or where they're being actively handled. But if we see more than that, then there's definitely a problem.
Erika, let me just ask you something I was mentioning earlier regarding the correct positioning of the captive boat. Would you expect a person to adopt a different location as a correct location if the person is stunning a Bos indicus like a Nelore versus a European cow and a European cattle regarding the correct positioning because of the front size of the animal?
I believe what's very important, Rosangela, okay, what's very important when you're training your employees, and this I learned from a gentleman in Canada. Okay, we have seen the cattle heads evolve over time. We have seen the cattle heads evolve and as the animals have gotten larger. And what they did, and this was back in like 2004, and there's a very famous picture that's been used by many, many companies, and I used it yesterday when I was training. And what you do is you saw that head down the middle, and you look at the trajectory. You look, where did that captive bolt go? You want to see where did it go, and you want to make sure that it penetrates, hopefully the center of the brain, and then it penetrates into the brain stem. Because when you penetrate the brain stem, what happens is that the brain is the thinking part that is thinking about, I'm afraid and I hurt. Okay, that's the thinking part. But the brain stem is where we have the breathing, and we have the kicking, and we have the blinking. That's where we're getting our function, okay, our other body functions. So if we can penetrate that brain stem, then we keep that animal insensible. And so it's best, yes, it's best to study this, study what's the best location, and the best way I know of is to saw them open and just look and make sure you're getting a good location. And then the other best practice that was incorporated a long time ago with these plants, and they've done a great job, is that they created diagrams, and they've created like a film with a little score sheet, just like playing darts, okay? And and you score the location of where you stun, so that you make sure that you're stunning in a good location.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, because my concern would be regarding the the X that we've learned for quite some time. Just take from the horn to the eye, and then to the horn to the eye, and then you stun right there. But then when you think about European cattle, like an Angus, for example, since the frontal part of the face, I mean the head, is shorter than a Nelore, then you could not go too high, otherwise you would miss the brain. While the Nelore would allow you a broader location. So again, just thinking about breed-wise, in that sense, I guess we need to watch. But it's a great. I mean, open up heads is the best training tool, right?
It's a wonderful training tool, and then the other thing that we do a lot is once we know our correct locations and we're evaluating that, is that we actually show the operators, or we give the operators an opportunity to go down and look at the heads and see how they're doing. And if it's like, all over the place like this, oh my gosh, you need work, So we give them very positive feedback because they're doing a good job, or we give them feedback, that they need to improve. Okay.
Right. Yes, very good. So, Erika, would you make any special comments regarding on how certified humane animals should be handled compared to, other non-certified cattle? Would you make any special comments based on your knowledge and your experience?
For cattle, I would say the thing I noticed the most with the cattle, okay, with the young cattle, like the babies, the milk-fed and grain-fed babies. The thing that I noticed the most with the babies is that the young cattle are actually more energetic and more playful and more alert. So they act more like grown-up cattle, okay, because they're raised in groups and they're used to having a lot of activity. So you have to keep that in mind when moving them. I will tell you that the majority of the plants that I visit that are working with certified humane cattle say that they like them because they move fairly easily. Okay, they don't have difficulty moving. All right, I mean they say we don't have too much trouble with these cattle. All right, because they're used to people. I mean, I think one of the things that's so important with that we train with anyone, okay, is if you have pasture cattle and you're handling them on horseback, the cattle see a person on horseback entirely different. That's a different being than a person on foot. Okay, so you need to make sure that your cattle see a human being on foot and learn to trust a human being on foot. Because if they go to the plant and the first time they ever see a human being on foot is at the plant because you've always been on your horse, then they will be afraid. So it's very important to get them used to people, and this would be for any type of cattle, but make sure they're used to people, make sure they're used to cattle, seeing people on foot, make sure they trust you, and that they haven't had bad experiences. If they've had bad experiences, those go with them. And that's one thing with the certified humane cattle, is that if we've done our job and followed the standards, they should not be having a bad experience that they take to the plant. Correct?
Yeah, definitely. Yes.
Okay.
That's how it should be. Okay.
Yes.
So do you have any experience or examples of newer technologies or best practices that can be used for human handling of livestock that you've seen?
It's really funny.
lately?
One of the simpler ones that I really liked was a tambourine, using a tambourine with cattle, and it's just and honestly, in the old days in Latin America, in the old days in Nicaragua, they didn't have the money for the tambourine, so they used a wire with some soda bottles, some Coke bottle tops, and made a pretend tambourine.
Yeah.
Okay, but now they got some money. Okay, so now they're using a real tambourine, and that's working very well. So that's a very simple one that seems to work well to move the cattle. I've seen people using compressed air and using a vibrating prod. And if you go to my website, vogueconsulting.com, you can see an example of how to create the vibrating prod. It's actually like an engraver that has a dulled surface, and it's air operated, and they use that instead of an electric prod. And it's kind of like, I put it on my hand, and it's kind of like a bug or something, buzzing on your hand.
Yeah.
So I've seen that. Recently I was at the NAMI Humane Handling Conference, the last one they had in Kansas City, and a group from Uruguay showed us. It was Jose Lestido from PROGAT, PROGAT, and they had designed a beautiful transport truck. And in Uruguay, they do a lot of the British breed cattle, okay? And they had designed cushioning for the trucks out of recycled materials, so it was sustainable. It was actually environmentally friendly, to cushion the areas of the truck where the most valuable cuts could be bruised. And then as well, they had rounded funnels that were extended during the loading and then extracted to prevent the animals from scraping their sides as they enter the truck. And I have seen trucks that have rounded edges to prevent the bruising on the sides. So that was a very interesting new technology. One of the ones I wrote about in Carnitech, there's a blog in Carnitech that I write every once in a while, and this one is a technology that's used presently on cattle, which is transdermal fluoxetine, which is called Banamine. That's the trade name from Merck, and the transdermal fluoxetine is usually used for cattle feet, and they were using it, in this case, you put a few drops on the rump of a baby piglet 24 hours before you castrate. And they found that it numbs the body enough during the procedure that it reduces the cortisol level in the babies 1 hour after the castration. All right. And then another thing that I wrote about, it's called degree to act, which is you take your phone and it's a temperature sensitive camera, and it would indicate injury or illness in the animals. Okay,
is it an app or just so?
It's an app on your. It's an app you can get on your phone, and a camera you can add to your phone, and you can use that to indicate. You know, you can like scan the animals, and in this case, they were using it on pigs. I'm not sure if it would have the same degree of effectiveness on cattle. I don't think they've gotten that far yet. Okay, but it's like an infrared camera, and I wrote about that also. So those are some of the newer technologies. One of the ones that is absolutely brilliant, okay, is I have seen people, when they have a stun box, they put a picture of a cow's rear end in the front of the stun box, okay, because the cow that's entering thinks that he or she is following the next cow, because cattle like to follow the leader.
Right.
Okay.
Well, did that work?
Yes.
Do you think that worked?
Yeah.
That's cool. And you know what? I had seen on that line something very interesting. I had read a while ago a study where they actually painted two eyes in the butt of the cattle down somewhere in Africa. And they've observed how was the level of how the percentage of animals that were actually attacked by lions and, you know, big cats. Yes.
Yeah.
By having the big eyes painted in their humps. And they found that the big eyes there prevented most cattle from being attacked. So the cattle that actually had the painting were much less likely to be attacked. Yeah, did you see that?
Yeah.
Less likely to be attacked by the big cat. So I was just imagining now this big back, this big rear of a cattle painted in there. And I guess, I guess it would work, but it's quite interesting. I haven't heard of that, Erika.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I have a plant that does it with pigs also, that did it with pigs, and it was very, very successful.
Quite interesting. Wow, great new ideas.
Yeah, something
Very
cute,
good, Erika.
you know, something simple.
Yeah, right. And simple sometimes works much better than high technology, right?
Seriously. Yeah. We've done some
Very good.
really simple things, you know?
Small changes, right? Big differences. Very good. Well, so Erika, just moving to kind of towards the end of our talk, just a final message. How do you envision, the future for the meat industry when thinking of animal welfare? How do you see that?
I believe that consumers are more concerned about welfare. I think that social responsibility and interest in the care of animals and the care of people, that it's become an ethical responsibility. And I think we've seen it spread worldwide. We've seen, obviously, more of the larger companies are asking for it, asking for humane handling audits and evaluations and standards. But I think basically people, once they're aware of what humane handling is and what the possibilities are, I believe that they want to do the right thing, and they want to know that animals are treated properly, especially because we're going to eat them. And if you understand karma, and if you understand the importance of treating them well in their final moments, it's truly a benefit, because you get a better product. So there's no downside to believing in animal welfare and supporting it.
Very good. And lastly, do you have any personal opinion regarding lab meat? you being an industry person for so many years. I mean, and that's again, it's kind of you feel free to answer if you want to, but I just thought of kind of challenging you a little bit on that. How do you see that?
I'm a very open-minded person, and I believe that if people prefer meat that doesn't come from a real animal, I talk to a lot. I go to STEM conferences, science, technology, engineering, and math. I go to STEM conferences and I talk to a lot of kids that don't want to eat meat. Okay. But I mean, if you understand nutrition and you understand the importance of the vitamins and the amino acids, the essential amino acids that come from meat and don't come from vegetables and grains, you need to have a source of that. And if they can find a source that's non-animal related, then more power for them. Okay. I think that assuring that the animal has a good life and a peaceful end, that's always been my goal. And that's Certified Humane's goal. Okay. So we're trying very hard to create a good life and a peaceful finish to create a protein product that works well for humans as well. Okay.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So Erika, once more, I want to say it's a great pleasure. I mean, seeing you and being here with you, even though we cannot be in person together as we had the chance a couple of years ago. So hopefully we'll see you soon when you come to Brazil. I know you're a big fan of Brazil, and
I
we like to have you there. Yes, and we like to have you too. So once more, thank you so much for sharing such precious information and your experience. We know that you have a lot of experience in the field. So I thank you also in the name of Certified Humane. And yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I'm a big supporter, and you did a fantastic job on this review. I miss you a lot. Kisses to your family and to everybody in Brazil and Latin America.
Hello, you are listening to the Certified Humane Podcast. Here you will stay up to date on the best practices of farm animal welfare from interviews with professionals and companies that work in the field. You can also follow these interviews on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Certified Humane. Stay tuned and well informed.
Olá, você está ouvindo o podcast Certified Humane. Aqui você vai ficar por dentro das melhores práticas de bem-estar para animais de produção a partir de entrevistas com profissionais e empresas que atuam na área. Você também pode acompanhar as entrevistas em nosso canal no youtube.com/certifiedhumane. Continue conosco e fique bem informado.
Hola, usted está escuchando el podcast Certified Humane. Aquí le contaremos las novedades de cuáles son las mejores prácticas de bienestar para los animales de producción. Compartiremos entrevistas con profesionales y empresas que trabajan en el sector. También podrá seguir estas entrevistas en nuestro canal youtube.com/certifiedhumane. Acompáñenos y manténgase bien informado.